Alright, here's the worm farm I was talking to you about. Okay, there's multiple styles. And this one is a, sorry about that, a multi-story. The worm's bed is down on the bottom and their food is up top. That way they crawl up through holes, eat the food, and go back to bed. Or whatever. And fair warning, this is going to be gross. But if your worm farm actually smells, then there's something wrong in the ecosystem. Okay, theirs has zero smell to it, no matter how much rotting food is in it. So let's go ahead and open the top and get my root beer out of the way. I do want to go ahead and mention that you want to get some coconut coir. They actually sell this. Okay. That's about $10 a brick. This will last about 6 months. And you only clean this out every 3-4 months or so. It depends on how many worms you have in there and how much food you feed them. You want to go ahead and undo some of this and soak it in water for a few minutes. Let it all nice and absorb. Alright, now before we do this, you need to put on gloves. The oils on your skin, no matter how much you wash them, can actually damage and kill the worms. So we want to give them their protection. You can get a whole bunch of these, you know, big old package over at the Dollar Tree. You're going to want a few buckets, particularly probably 2. And here's what I do as a daily maintenance. There's a spout right at the front here for any moisture, or that I want to say it's kind of like a compost tea, a worm tea, that you'll want to get rid of every day and feed it to your plants. They're great for indoor plants, outdoor plants. And it's concentrated. So if you see that, you can add that to like a gallon of water and it'll fertilize just about everything in the garden. Now the bottom of this is also kind of icky, where that moisture drains to. I'll show you that. Might help if I put gloves on right. Here we go. The thumb goes into the thumb hole. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and lift the bottom completely up. Check for worms. This is going to be incredibly, incredibly gross. Place that on top of one of your buckets so it can drain. See how the moisture has pushed the core down? This is what you want out of this. This is the fertilizer. Now, I don't see any dead ones, which is a good thing, which means that they are very happy. Where they're at. So we're going to take this Let's go ahead and put this all into, always have one bucket for the good stuff and one bucket for the worms. And you're probably going to need another bucket for the unused food that you've been throwing in here. Now let's go ahead and rinse this out. Now I've had this worm farm for 2 years, and I am still working off the original worms that were given to me. I took a class on this at the library. Now what we want to go ahead and do, so we want to remove the 2 stories. And if you see, as you can see, let me get some light on there. There are plenty of live worms climbing up. That's what we want to see. Now, just to let you know, worms do not like light. Okay, they will do whatever they can to get away from the light. And I see baby worms. I don't know if you can see this. It looks like the wormies have been getting none on. Let's see if I can't get the star of the show on here. See that little itty bitty white strand? That's a baby. So obviously we want to keep as many babies as possible. There's some food down here. We want to separate the worms from the coconut core. The easiest way I've found for me is just to do this by hand. There's a lot of people who say, you know, do it outside because they don't like the light. The worms will actually go down and through the holes. I've never found that to be true. They'll gather in a corner, and you got to separate them anyway. But do whatever is best for you. I have a feeling most of these worms are up top, because with me seeing babies, which here's a little bit more of a teenager. See if we can get a good picture of him. Maybe. Maybe. A little shiny. There's a teenager. I'll go ahead and put him on top in the food. And any other living wormies. See how they don't like the light? They're trying to get away. Now, we're not doing anything really with the food. Because there's still undigested food in here. We are going to go ahead and take the top layer off and separate the bottom layers, because that's where the worm casings are. And if you also notice there, I've got flying things around here. You're not going to be able to get rid of gnats. The best way to get rid of the gnats is to pretty much have traps. especially here in the South where anything grows. This is way too moist for worms. I'm glad we're doing this today. Worms do like a moist environment, but they don't like too moist. There's a baby. They will go to higher ground if they can, because then they will die. And they won't have that nice red hue. They will get sick. So you want to keep an eye on your worms, your compost, and how much you're feeding them. I try to feed them once a month. Put enough food in there for them to work and digest. Because worms, for this style of worm farm, I'd say no more than 3 pounds of scraps. Now, just to let you know, worms will literally eat anything. They don't like spicy food. They don't like onions. They don't like garlic. They don't like peppers. That being said, they'll eat anything else. They will eat meat. They will eat bones. They will eat eggshell. I actually dehydrate my eggshells. We buy eggs locally here. I will dehydrate them and I will feed them into my worm food. Now, what this does, it adds calcium to the compost. Compost you add to tomatoes. Tomatoes are very, very dependent on calcium. You look like you're about ready to give birth. That's a fat one. But anybody who has something like, teenager, something like they grow food indoors because they're in an apartment or don't have any real recourse on soil, or just needing to be able to feed their plants, this is a really good option, because this can be in your kitchen. You don't have to worry about the weather. You don't have to worry about watering like a big old compost pile, anything like that. Even though we have one, and we are working on turning that over and putting the compost into the beds, because it's planting time. Finally. But this is just as important. I do this before winter, and I do this after winter. Because during winter, I feed it scraps. And during the growing season, I feed it the plants that I pull. Say if you grow radishes, you can feed it the radish tops, carrot tops, lettuce that has bolted. You don't have to put it into a compost pile to be used in a year. You can use this in 3 months. And if you've ever tried to price the worm casings, which is basically worm poo. Poo. P-O-O. Po. Poo. Po. Great. I have another one. Anyway, then you'll understand why this is the cheaper option. Now, I got this set off of Amazon for about $50. I don't know what the price is now. I don't need another one. I mean, I could use another one, but I don't need another one. And the only maintenance that you're going to have is that coconut coir. Make sure it's pure 100% made for worm farm. There is way too many products out there that say it's coconut coir, but they add fertilizers because they think you're going to add it to your garden for moisture. Well, we're adding it to the garden in a roundabout way with fertilizer. But you don't want those fertilizers to damage your herd. Is it a herd of worms? That would be interesting to Google. I mean, this is my homestead. This and my garden. At least for now. We have been planning on getting chickens. But the restrictions in my city are to the point to where I may not be able to. That's why we buy locally, at least right now. I do believe a lot of this is pretty much worm free. Ah, there's a go-go. Hey, worm sex. Make the babies. Make the babies. Please make the babies. We like worm sex. That means we have a healthy environment. And if the babies get into where I'm going to put it in the garden, they'll just grow up in the garden. Or grow up in a pot. Because overwinter some of my vegetables. I have a tangerine tree, 2 orange trees, and a cutting off of a lemon that I don't think made it through the second freeze. I'm hoping it did. I had to put that in the ground because it was root bounding my biggest pot. And there was no way that it would have survived if I had left it in there. Okay, now that you have all the bedding out, which you will be using as fertilizer for your starts, what you want to do is you want to put some either cardboard, I recommend newspaper, a few layers of newspaper onto this to help keep the bedding in, because it's going to fall like that. After you rinse this out. Okay, so I couldn't find any newspaper, but this will do. Okay, make sure if you use anything like magazines or anything, it doesn't have that gloss on it. The worms cannot tolerate plastic. You do that. Now on top of that, you want to add your soaked coconut coir. Some of this will get even more soaked later on. Because worms don't like too moist. The moisture from the food will actually go down into here, and then they will expel it into the bottom, and that's what the worm tea is. I may have soaked too much. About halfway through, because you're going to put this on top. This is where they're going to make their babies, have worm sex, you know, all that nice animal stuff. Now I do want to add some of the original fertilizer on top, just in case there's any other babies in here, to help repopulate the species. Now, what we're going to do with this is the food chamber. This is always going to be gross. If you notice, I put seeds in here, which I could probably sprout a whole bunch of my seeds. I could probably plant that, but I'm not going to because it's worm food. I have enough squash seeds. So what we're going to do, we're going to take the top off of this. See all the egg shells? Those will eventually get broken down. And look how active that is. It's very nice. Cabbage core that I did from kraut. And look at this. 1 month ago, I threw this in here. And they have already eaten the tender leaves off of here. And eventually they will go ahead and get the core and start hollowing that out once they have an opportunity. Now they're going to start moving down, which is what we want. If you notice all that movement. And look at that. Look at all those worms. They're inside the eggshells. They are inside everything. Look at that. Look how tight they are. You want to try to get as much of this stuff out as possible without damaging the worms. But it's really hard whenever they're tiny like this. Oh, look at all that. And here's that paper that I put down last time. So we want to mix everything up. Try to get as many of these babies out as possible. They will repopulate. If some of these go into the garden, better for the garden. See how they're in the eggshell? Look at that. These are my farm animals. It looks like the bedding is all we're going to be able to get. I'm pretty sure there's too many eggshells in here, which is fine. It's all fine. We'll check next time. And let's go ahead and fluff everything up. Put everything back. And continue to feed. Now, there is a way that you can do this and take some of this out. So you can actually put this, what you brought out into the garden. And then the worms will just go into the garden. I have box raised beds. So this would be perfect for that. But what you want to do is not take out so much that you would endanger your colony. So I'm going to take about half of this, put it back. That's a squash stem. I'm going to put that in the garden. And I'm going to go ahead and put this in the garden in one of my box beds. And we're going to keep this to repopulate the species. Take out all the big chunks. Put them back in. Okay, and now what we want to do, besides breaking everything up as much as we can, I'm going to put a little bit more coconut coir in here. Every once in a while you want to add some shredded paper or some cardboard to this to try to bring up the moisture, or to soak up the moisture from the vegetables. I'll put some more of the coconut coir on top to try to soak some of that up, but we've removed about half of this moisture already. Now I've got some vegetables that didn't quite make it in my refrigerator. I've been waiting to do this. I'm going to fill this up. I have some zucchinis and some rotted tomatoes and coffee grounds. I will tell you one thing right now, that for the love of God, they love coffee grounds. You want to see a active worm farm? Add your used coffee grounds. They will devour everything in here quicker, being high on caffeine. That's probably the reason why I get along with these worms so much. Is because of our love of coffee. So, there you have it. Now it's going to take a few days. Hey, I have an escapee. Back in the bin. Thank you. Okay, any more? Any more escapees? Nope. 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 Alright. So let's go ahead and put the lid back on. Wipe everything down. And you have a new colony for the next 3-4 months.